Now, Locke says that there are certain inconveniences. Now, the word inconveniences had a stronger connotation at the time he wrote than it does today, but there were inconveniences of the state of nature. And by state of nature, he means a pre-political world before there were governments, in which all of us were pursuing our natural rights to our lives and our liberty, to the domain of control over our bodies, but that prior to the establishment of government, we enjoy these things, according to him, only precariously. And you don't need to dwell on this, but I'll just say very quickly, for example, in the state of nature, there's no body of universally recognized law we can appeal to. There's no reliable law enforcement. And thirdly, we have the problem of people being very bad judges in their own cases. People are going to tend to side with themselves if a case of conflict should arise. So, according to Locke, we need to remedy these deficiencies by means of civil government, and we therefore delegate to that civil government some portion of the rights we would enjoy completely in the state of nature. We delegate some of these, for example, perhaps some of our self-defense, like, for example, judicial services. We would delegate that to governments, and so governments would be there to perform just night watchman services, simply to protect rights of property and right to life, and that would be it. And if they try to exercise powers beyond these that are strictly necessary for these purposes, then the people would have the power to abolish that government, because then that government would be interfering with rather than protecting their rights. Now, a much more recent figure, and I know how fast this is super fast, but that's what an intro is, baby, and then it makes you want to read more, because I know that's what we all need in this room. We're saying, man, oh man, I wish I had something to read. Well, the next guy I want to talk about is much more recent. He died only very recently. Robert Nozick was a Harvard philosopher. What's very significant about him is that his book, Anarchy, State, and Utopia from 1974, it's a very rare case of a professional philosopher who's very respected at a top university taking liberty arguments seriously. And that's what he does in this book. He argues for a minimal state that exists for the provision of rights protection services. But know what? That's what the state is confined to. Now, he was criticized in an article called Libertarianism Without Foundations, because he doesn't give an express account of how people come to enjoy rights, or what the source of people's rights might be. He doesn't talk about this expressly in the book. So he was criticized for this. Well, you're just arbitrarily making assertions. But his defense to this, undoubtedly, would be that in this book he is making an appeal to principles that everybody would take for granted. There's no obvious need to belabor the point by giving you a 30-chapter explanation of why slavery is wrong. So I think I've already got a pretty big book here in Anarchy, State, and Utopia. I assume I can take for granted that people are against slavery. I'm going to assume that they already know slavery is bad. So if I then turn around and say, hey, this thing is just like slavery, people will understand this thing is bad. Or converse, any form of forced labor. Again, he's assuming that the general run of mankind takes for granted that forced labor is morally wrong. So if he can show that something that the government does is just like forced labor, then likewise we can say that that's morally wrong, without having to go into a lengthy exposition of why forced labor is wrong. This is a moral intuition most people already hold. And so this is right out of his book. He says, and this is Roman numeral 4, part C, he says, taking the earnings of n hours labor is like taking n hours from the person. It is like forcing the person to work n hours for another's purpose. And that's why he argued that an income tax was on a par with forced labor. Because how is it conceptually different? And this drove philosophers crazy. If the best argument you can come up with is, well, you never explained why forced labor is bad, then you know you won, right? That's what they come up with. Now, on the next page here, we've got an even more radical exposition of natural rights, and this is in the hands of Murray Rothbard, 1926 to 1995. Now, Rothbard, in fact, extends Locke's analysis. And he believes Locke is sort of inconsistent. He makes concessions that he shouldn't make. And Rothbard just eliminates all the concessions. His argument is that the only defensible philosophical position is 100% self-ownership. That there's no alternative. And by the way, now I see I actually have plenty of time, so now I'm going to slow it down a little. Slow down. Okay. All right. I didn't think I'd ever get through this. Now here we are, page 2. Okay. So Rothbard starts with the principle of self-ownership, and he derives that in part indirectly by considering what would the alternatives be to 100% self-ownership. What other possible systems could there be? And if I can show that those systems either don't work or lead to absurdities or fail to answer the question as posed, then we're left with the only alternative, which would be 100% self-ownership. So he offers in his book, The Ethics of Liberty, 1982 or 3, he offers 3 possible alternatives. I think it's 82. He says, first of all, this is just in a footnote. He says, suppose we had a system in which nobody owns anybody. Nobody owns himself or anybody else. What would be the result of a system like that? Well, again, if we consider the meaning of ownership in this sense as being exercising a range of control, well, then in that case, if nobody owns anybody, including himself, nobody could eat, nobody could breathe, because no one would have legitimate range of control over his own body. No one would have the permission, in effect, to do anything. So everybody would be dead. So this can't be right. The idea that no one should have range of control over anyone, including himself, can't possibly work. Secondly, everybody owns everyone, or maybe slightly more accurate, everybody owns a portion of everyone else. This would be a possible sort of communism of bodies. Everybody owns a portion of himself, but also owns a portion of every other person. All right, well, how's that going to work? Right? I mean, again, if ownership implies range of control, that would mean I have a range of control over every single other person. So nobody can actually do anything unless they've gotten my consent and the consent of everybody else. Well, again, this is obviously absurd. There's no way this could persist. And obviously, if you have a society of a whole lot of people, how could everybody keep tabs on everybody else and say, now wait a minute, I haven't given my 4% vote on your body yet, so you're going to have to just stay and wait. It would be impractical, even if it could be done. So what would inevitably have to happen would be you'd have to have some sort of Kremlin-type Politburo situation where the Politburo will decide what to do with everybody's bodies, and then that would lead us to the third possibility, partial ownership of one group by another. So there's another possibility. Let's suppose we have a situation in which one group of people they all own themselves, but they also own another group of people in the society. Well, Rothbard has a couple arguments against this, but one of them is this fails to answer what it is we're searching for. We're searching for a universal ethic for man, for mankind, that would apply to man qua man. Now, if you're going to say that, well, the correct ethic would be that people with red hair get to dominate people with black hair, that's not an ethic for man. That's an ethic for one group of people. We're looking for a universal standard that would apply to everybody. So this doesn't even meet the definition of what we're seeking. So this is excluded. So according to Rothbard, the only alternative that's left is self-ownership. It's 100% self-ownership of each person by himself.